I have given a lot of orders in the cold. Most of them I could give again tomorrow and sleep the same. There is one I would give differently now, and it is the only one that ever mattered. We were 9 days into the Kalvar frontier when I learned the exact weight of a decision. 9 days of white, not the postcard white of a ski slope, but the gray white of a place that has decided it does not want you. A flat frozen reach that ran to the edge of sight in every direction, and then kept running past it. The reach, we called it, because it had no proper name on any map worth trusting, and because it reached for you the moment you stepped onto it, pulled the heat out of your gloves and the spit off your teeth and the certainty out of your plans. I was a captain then. I commanded a recon and direct action element, 12 men I would have put against anything the world could field, and I believed that the way a man believes in his own hands. We had worked the northern conflicts together long enough that I could read the whole team by the set of their shoulders in the dark. I knew who was cold and hiding it, who was scared and hiding it, who was neither and only tired. I knew my men. That was the trouble. I knew my men, and I did not know her, and I let the difference decide something it had no business deciding. Her name was Ruth Vale. Command attached her to us at the last staging point, 40 hours before we crossed the line of departure, and she came the way an unwanted thing always comes, with paperwork, with someone else's signature, with the flat institutional insistence that she was necessary. Sergeant First Class Vale. A sniper. Long-range overwatch, the order said, for a movement that command had decided was too important to send without a dedicated shooter. We already had shooters. We had Das, who could put a round through a keyhole at 600 meters and did not need anyone to remind him of it. What we did not have was room in a tight team for a stranger, and what I did not have was the sense to keep my doubt to myself. I remember the first time I saw her rifle case. It was longer than she was, a hard black coffin of a thing, and she carried it across the staging tent on her shoulder like it weighed nothing, and set it down without a sound. She was not large. She was not small. She was somewhere in her late 30s, with the kind of face the cold had already been working on for years, weathered at the eyes, still and unhurried in a way that read, to men like us, as either supreme competence or supreme luck, and we were not inclined to guess competence about a person command had spent on us like we couldn't do our own job. They sent us a range queen, Das said that night low, so it would carry only as far as the men who agreed with him. It carried to all of them. Somebody with a record and no trigger time. I should have shut it down. A good commander shuts that down, because a team that decides a person is baggage will treat that person like baggage, and baggage gets left. Instead, I let it live. I let it live because a small, ungenerous part of me agreed, and because agreeing was easier than the work of finding out. She's got the shot record for the selection cadre, someone offered Peralta, our youngest, who read the attachment sheet all the way through the way the young ones do. Paper says 3 years instructing before that. Paper, Das said, and the word landed exactly the way he wanted it to. Paper. That became her name in the team's private grammar. Not out loud, not to her face, we were disciplined, not cruel, but in the shorthand men use when they've decided about someone. The paper shooter. The range record. The stranger who'd fold the first time the cold and the fear and the noise arrived together, because a range does not shoot back and the reach does. She heard it, I know that now. A person who spends her life reading wind at a mile learns to read a room from across it, and she read hours in about 4 seconds and never once asked us to change. That is the part I could not have understood then. I mistook her silence for meekness. I thought a real operator would have pushed back, would have made her case, would have earned her place by matching our volume. She did not raise her voice a single time in 9 days. I read that as weakness. It was the most disciplined thing I have ever watched a soldier do, and I read it as weakness, and I built a decision on the misreading. The mission itself was clean enough on paper, that word again. A reconnaissance element of ours, 4 men, had gone silent near a militia strongpoint at a frozen crossing called Vosk, on the far side of the reach. We were to cross, confirm, recover if they lived and account for them if they didn't, and come back before the weather that the meteorologists promised in 72 hours arrived to bury the whole frontier. Vale's job was to hold a far overwatch during our movement and our exfil, to sit somewhere impossible and cold and see the things a moving team cannot see, and to have the reach to touch them if they moved on us. "You'll want me high and left of your route," she told me at the final brief, the only time she volunteered anything unasked. She had a map folded to the exact panel she needed and a grease pencil already in her hand. "There's a spine of rock about 4 kilometers off your axis, old and hard. Good sightline down your whole exfil corridor and back to the crossing. If it goes bad on the way out, that's where the pursuit will chase you, and that's the ground I can cover." 4 kilometers off axis is a long way from the team, I said. "It's a long way from the team," she agreed. "It's exactly the right distance from the corridor." I remember thinking she wanted the distance because distance was where she could hide, where the paper shooter could stay clear of the part where the reach shoots back. I told her to plan for it and moved on. I did not ask her the one question a wiser man would have asked, which was, how far can you actually reach from that spine, and what would you have to be to reach it? I did not ask because I did not want the answer to complicate the story I had already decided to believe. We crossed under a dead sky. The reach in movement is a discipline all its own, the white swallow's depth, so a man learns to trust his compass over his eyes, to count paces, to distrust the horizon that keeps promising an edge and delivering more white. Vale peeled off 2 hours in, at the base of the spine she'd marked, and I watched her go with something close to relief. One less variable. She lifted the black case, checked her bearing once, and walked up into the rock without a backward look, and the gray took her, and I turned my mind fully to the 4 men at Vosk and the weather at our backs and the 12 I still had with me. I did not think about her again until the moment I needed her, and had already thrown her away. Vosk was worse than silent. The recon element was gone, not captured, gone, in the way the frontier makes men gone, and the strongpoint that should have held a token militia garrison held something closer to a company, dug into the frozen bank of the crossing with heavy weapons and the patience of men who knew we would come. We confirmed what we had crossed the reach to confirm, and we paid for the confirming. They caught our movement on the exfil leg, exactly where Vale had said the pursuit would chase us, up the corridor toward the spine, and in 90 seconds a clean withdrawal became a running fight across open white with no cover for a mile, and a column of them coming off the crossing behind us like water off a broken dam. I lost 2 men wounded in the first push. Das took a round through the meat of the thigh and kept firing off his back until Peralta and I dragged him. Our comms to higher were down to static, and the promise of air we could not raise and could not see. We were 9 effective, 2 lit urgent, half a click onto the open reach, and the militia column was gaining because they were fresh and unburdened and we were carrying our hurt. And there was a moment, I want to be honest about the shape of it, because the shape is the whole confession. There was a moment on that ice where the arithmetic was simple and terrible, and I did the arithmetic and I gave the order. The spine was to our left, Vale's spine, 4 kilometers off our axis, exactly as advertised, which meant she was 4 kilometers from where we were dying and might as well have been on the moon. And the smaller, closer thing, the thing my eye kept snagging on as I ran and calculated and ran, was that I did not know if she was still up there, or if she had folded, or if the paper shooter was already a frozen shape in the rocks, and I did not have the seconds to find out, and I had 2 men bleeding and a column closing and every instinct I owned screaming, "Move, do not stop, do not turn. Do not spend one more life reaching back for a stranger who is probably already gone." So I made the call. I keyed what comms I had and I did not call for her. I did not turn the team toward the spine. I wrote her off, not with a word, not with cruelty, but with the cleanest and most damning thing a commander can do, which is silence and a heading that points away. I decided, in the space of 2 breaths on the open ice, that Sergeant First Class Ruth Vale was a cost we had already paid, a piece of the mission left behind at the crossing like the 4 men we could not recover. And I turned my 12 and my wounded south and I ran, and I left our sniper alone in the rocks with a column between her and any way home. I told myself it was mathematics. It was mathematics. It was also the last thing I did before I learned what she was. I did not know it was a shot at first. On the open reach, sound arrives wrong, the cold bends it. The flat white throws it back at you from the wrong direction. And a thing that happens a mile away can land in your ear like it happened at your shoulder or not at all. What I knew was that the man leading the militia column, the one who had been setting their pace and closing our lead by the yard, simply stopped. One stride he was driving them forward, and the next he was down and not moving, and the men behind him checked up hard the way men do when the front of a formation dies without warning, and no one has heard the reason yet. "Contact left," Peralta shouted, twisting, rifle up, hunting a threat that made no sense because left was empty, left was the spine, left was 4 kilometers of nothing. "Keep moving," I said. "Keep moving, that's a gift, don't ask who wrapped it." We ran. Behind us the column recovered, spread, came on again, angrier now, but slower, because a formation that has learned its lead man can die from nowhere moves with its shoulders hunched. That slowing bought us 50 meters. 50 meters, on the open ice with 2 Litterurgent, is the difference between a fighting withdrawal and a slaughter. I took the 50 meters, and I did not let myself wonder where they came from. The second shot took their heavy weapons man. I understood that one, because I was looking at him when it happened. A big militiaman who had gone to a knee and was bringing a belt-fed gun up onto its bipod. The one weapon in their whole column that could have reached across the gap and cut my team apart at leisure. And I remember thinking that gun ends us. And I remember opening my mouth to call it. And before the word was out, he pitched sideways off the bipod, and the gun went over with him into the snow and did not come back up. No sound I could separate from the wind. No muzzle flash I could find on any horizon. Just a man reaching for the one tool that would have finished us, and then that man not reaching for anything, ever again. Das, flat on the litter, bleeding, teeth locked against the jolt of every step, turned his head and looked back the way we'd come and then looked at me. He had been the loudest about the paper shooter. He was not a stupid man. I watched the arithmetic start behind his eyes, the same arithmetic that would take me most of the night to finish, and he did not say anything, because there was nothing yet to say that would not have been an accusation of himself. We credited it to luck at first. Men will credit almost anything to luck when the alternative asks something of them. The lead man was luck. The gunner was luck. Somewhere our air had finally gotten overhead, unseen above the gray. That was the second story, the one we told for about an hour as the shots kept the column honest, and our 50 meters became 100, became 200, became the kind of lead that lets a broken team think about living. It had to be air. Nothing on the ground could reach us out here. Nothing on the ground could put a man down at the front of a column, wait, read the field, find the one weapon that mattered most in the whole formation, and take that one next in that order with that patience. That was not luck, and it was not a lone shooter. That was a targeting computer. That was the sky. Except the sky never checked in. The sky never broke squelch, never rolled in low for a gun run, never did any of the loud, obvious things that friendly air does when it arrives to save you. Whatever was killing the column was doing it in a silence so total that we kept inventing louder explanations to cover the quiet, because the quiet, if you sat with it, pointed somewhere none of us wanted to look. It pointed left. It pointed high and left, 4 kilometers off our axis, to a spine of old hard rock where I had told a woman to go, and then told the ice to keep her. Night came the way it comes up there, not as a sunset but as a slow subtraction of the little light there'd been, the white going to gray, going to a blue so deep it swallowed the difference between ground and sky. And in that dark the shots kept coming. Not fast. That was the thing that finally broke my luck story into pieces I couldn't hold together anymore, the rhythm of it. Luck is not rhythmic. Luck is a scatter. This was a metronome. Every time the column found a new way to press us, a squad peeling wide to flank, a team rushing a low fold in the ice to close the gap, a man crawling up with a launcher to reach for our litters. There would be a pause, a long, patient pause that I came to understand was someone breathing, someone waiting, someone letting the wind tell her a thing before she answered it, and then one shot, and the threat would simply cease to be a threat. One shot, one threat, over and over across the whole frozen dark in the exact order the threats mattered. I have spent my life around good shooters. Das is a good shooter. I have watched national-level competitors and I have watched combat marksmen who earned their reputations in places worse than the Reach. I had never seen anything like what was happening in the dark to our left, and slowly, the way you come to a thing you've been refusing, I began to understand that I was not watching luck and I was not watching the sky. I was watching a single human being do arithmetic with a rifle at distances. I did not have the vocabulary to insult, and do it alone, and do it for the exact team that had named her baggage and left her in the rocks to die. Peralta said it first, because the young ones will say the thing the rest of us are managing not to. Sir, his voice was very careful, that's not air. No, I said, it isn't. That's the spine, he swallowed. Sir, that's her ground, she marked it. She said if it went bad the pursuit would chase us up the corridor and that's the ground she could cover. He was quoting her almost word for word, the young ones remember. She told us, at the brief, she told us exactly this and we. I know what we did, I said, and it came out harder than he'd earned, because it was aimed at me and there was no one else close enough to aim it at. We had left her, and she had not folded and she had not run, and she had not spent 1 second of the night on the entirely reasonable human project of saving herself. She had done the opposite. She had climbed onto her cold spine of rock with a column of the enemy between her and any road home, and she had gone to work covering the withdrawal of the men who wrote her off, one impossible shot at a time, in the dark, alone, silent, never once keying a radio to remind us she existed, because reminding us was not the mission, and the mission was us. We found out what she was doing out there in pieces, over the hours and over the days after, and I will tell it the way it assembled for me, because the assembling is the thing. A far shooter's work is not the shot. The shot is the last 1%. The work is everything underneath, the ground, the wind, the cold, the light, the math, the waiting, and Ruth Vale, alone on that spine, was running all of it in a frozen dark with numbers that would have broken most men before they ever touched a trigger. The cold alone should have been the end of it. A rifle is a machine of tolerances, and cold moves every tolerance. The powder burns different, the metal shrinks, the very air gets thick and heavy and pushes back on a bullet harder than warm air does, so that a round that flies true at noon flies short and low at midnight, and a shooter who does not account for it will miss every man she aims at by a margin that widens with the range. She was reaching across kilometers in the deep cold and hitting, which meant she was not just shooting. She was correcting density, temperature, the slow drift of a wind she could not fully feel from where she lay, the way the ground itself gave off or stole heat in patches that bent the air above it. She was reading a battlefield she was 4 kilometers from, in the dark, through glass, and solving it fast enough to matter. Again and again, while her hands went to ice and her body begged her to move and get warm and live. She did not move. Moving is heat and heat is life, but moving is also a lost sightline, and a lost sightline is a dead man on our litter she couldn't cover. So she stayed. She stayed until her position must have been agony, until the cold was doing to her the thing the cold does, and she solved another problem and took another threat and gave us another 100 meters we had not earned. The reveal, when it finally came, did not come as a revelation. It came as a voice. Our comms had been static in prayer for hours, line of sight ruined by the terrain, higher unreachable, the whole team relying on short-range squad nets that barely spanned our own strung-out column. And then, in the blue dark, with the column pressing us again toward a low choke point in the ice where the corridor narrowed, and a wounded man was slowing, and a militia team was rushing that narrow to catch us in it. My earpiece crackled with a signal that had no business reaching me, thin and cold and impossibly level. A woman's voice that had not spoken to any of us in a full day. Wolf Element, hold your left. Don't push the narrow yet. There's a team setting on your litters from the fold at your 10. Give me 4 seconds. I did not answer. I could not. I put my hand up and stopped the whole column in the throat of the choke point, against every instinct that said run through it. And I held, and I counted. And at 4 seconds a militiaman I never saw rose from a fold of ice at our 10 o'clock with a launcher already on his shoulder aimed at the litter carrying Das. And at 4 seconds in a fraction he was not aiming at anything anymore. And the crack of it reached us a full second later, rolling down off the spine, off her ground. Arriving late, the way the truth had been arriving late all night. Narrow's clear now, the voice said. Move your wounded, I have your left. Say your call, Sin, I said. My own voice did not sound like mine. A pause, the wind, the cold, patient breathing of someone a mile and more away with her eyes still down her glass. Meridian, she said. I've had your left since the crossing, Wolf. I never didn't have it. Meridian. The line a navigator runs a whole world along, the one you measure everything else against. She had chosen it, or been given it, long before any of us mocked a rifle case across a staging tent, and she had earned it in rooms and ranges and places our team knew nothing about because we had not bothered to ask, had decided instead that a stranger's silence was the same thing as a stranger's weakness. I had left Meridian in the rocks. I had done the arithmetic and left the best shooter I would ever serve beside alone in the dark, and she had answered not with the rage she was owed but with the one word that told me, finally and completely, exactly what I had thrown away. I never didn't have it, and then she had gone back to the work of saving us. The extraction point was a shallow bowl in the ice the maps called the Pan, 3 kilometers south of the choke point, chosen because it was the one flat place on that stretch of the reach where a bird could set down without tearing itself apart on hidden rock. It was also, I understood now with the clarity of a man who has finally started listening, 3 kilometers of open ground with a column behind us, and a spine of rock to our left, where a single soldier lay in the cold, holding the whole thing together with her hands and her math and her refusal to quit. We ran for the Pan. What was left of us? Das on the litter with a tourniquet high on his leg and his color going the wrong way, and the second wounded man, Pharaoh, who'd caught a fragment in the shoulder at the choke point and was on his feet only because 2 others were carrying most of him. 9 effective down to 7 who could still fight, 2 who could still shoot straight, and behind us the militia column had done the thing that a well-led enemy does when a single shooter has been carving it apart all night. It had stopped feeding men into her sights one at a time and started moving smart, using folds and dead ground and speed, spreading wide so that no one shot could take more than one of them, closing the distance in rushes timed to her rhythm, learning her the way she had learned them. They knew now. That was the danger in the last hour. All night she had owned them because they did not understand what was killing them. Now they understood. Now they were hunting the spine as hard as they were hunting us, peeling a flanking squad off toward her ground, moving to put her in the crossfire she had spent the night denying them. And she could feel it, I think, the way she felt everything because her voice in my ear changed, not in its steadiness but in its economy, fewer words, longer gaps. A soldier spending her breath and her warmth and her time like a woman who has done the arithmetic on herself, and does not much like the answer, but is not going to let it change what she does. Wolf, you've got a squad crossing to my base. I'm going to lose the low sightlines when they get into the rocks under me. When that happens, I can't see your left for about 90 seconds while I reset higher. Push hard in that window. Don't wait for me. I'll catch back up to you. Meridian, come off the spine, I said. I had stopped running the math that left her out. I was running a different math now, a worse one for the mission and the only one I could live with. That squad's going to be in your rocks. Come off, move south, we'll cover a link up at the pan, do not stay up there with them under you. The pause was longer than the wind should have made it. If I come off, she said, you lose your left for a lot longer than 90 seconds. You've got open ground to the pan and a column that's figured out how to move. You come off that spine, you're carrying 2 liters across 3 clicks of nothing with no one watching the long shot. Another pause. I could hear under the level of her voice the effort it now cost her to make the words come out warm and clear. I'll reset high. I'll hold your left. Get your wounded to the pan, Captain. That's the job. That's the job. She said it the way you'd remind a junior man of a thing he'd forgotten, gently, without heat, and it went into me like the cold went into her, all the way to the center, because I was the one who had left her and she was the one reminding me what the job was. I did not order her off again. I understood, finally, that I could not give Ruth Vale an order that mattered more to her than the men on those litters, and that trying was an insult on top of the one I had already committed, and that the only decent thing left for me to do was the thing she was asking, get my wounded to the pan and trust her left the way I should have trusted it from the staging tent. So I did. We crossed the last open ground under her cover, in her rhythm, in the 90-second windows she called, and the shots she spent to buy the rest. Twice more in that run, a threat rose to end us and did not, because a mile away and higher now, on ground she'd had to climb to under fire, Meridian solved it and took it and never once let the effort into her voice. We made the lip of the pan with the column 300 meters back and closing, and our extraction bird a promise on a radio net we still could not raise, and we went down into the bowl and set the litters and turned to make a stand at the rim, 7 of us, because a stand at the rim was all that was left. And that was when they made their play for her. The flanking squad had reached the base of the spine. I could not see it, the spine was a mile off, a black tooth against a black sky, but I could read it in the fight, the way you read a far-off storm by what the near air does. The shots from her ground changed. They came faster now, and lower, and I understood she was no longer reaching across kilometers for the men chasing us. She was fighting for her own life at close range against a squad coming up her rocks, and still, between those close, desperate shots, she was stealing the half-seconds to reach back out across the whole frozen dark and touch the men closing on our bowl, splitting herself between the enemy at her feet and the enemy at ours. And there is a limit to what one soldier can do split like that, and the column at our rim knew it, and they came. They came off the north lip in a rush, a dozen of them fast, using the moment they'd bought by forcing her to fight close, and we met them at the rim with everything we had left, and it was not going to be enough. 7 rifles against a rush, 2 of our 7 barely upright, the muzzle flashes strobing the bowl white and blue, and I remember thinking, with the strange flat calm that comes at the end, she bought us the whole night, and we are going to lose it here in the last 300 meters, and there is nothing she can do about it from a mile away with a squad in her rocks. There was one man, I will remember him until I die. He came over the north lip ahead of the others, low and fast and smart, and he was not shooting. He had a satchel, the heavy squared shape of a breaching charge or something worse, and he was driving straight for the litters in the center of the bowl where our wounded lay. And I saw exactly what he meant to do, and I was 30 meters away with 3 men between us, and I was not going to reach him, and no one was going to reach him, and he was going to reach Das and Pharaoh and end them and probably most of us with them. And the whole night she had spent, every impossible shot, every degree of cold she'd taken into her body, all of it was going to come down to one man with a satchel that no one close enough could stop. He was inside the bowl. He was past our rim. He was a man running downhill toward wounded soldiers across open ground, and the only angle in the world that could touch him now was from high and to the left, from a spine a mile and more away, from a shooter who, at that exact moment, was supposed to be fighting for her own life against a squad in her rocks, and had no business having an eye free for us at all. I found out the number later, when the recovery team walked the ground and someone with a laser, and a map did the flat, unbelievable arithmetic of it. 3,540 meters. From the high reset she had climbed to under fire, across the whole dark bowl of the pan, in the deep cold that thickened the air and dragged the bullet down, with a squad coming up the rocks beneath her and her own hands, surely past feeling, 3,540 meters, to a man moving downhill through friendly troops toward the litters. A shot with almost no margin for the wind she couldn't fully feel, and the density she had to guess, and the drop that at that range falls away like the world dropping out from under a bullet. She took it. I did not hear the shot first. At that range you never do. The bullet outruns its own report by whole seconds. What I saw first was the man with the satchel, mid-stride, driving 10 meters from the litters, simply and completely stopped being a threat, taken cleanly and finally between one stride and the next, the satchel tumbling from his hands into the snow unlit, his own momentum carrying him down and past the wounded he'd meant to kill. And for one full second the whole bowl was silent, the near fight frozen in the shock of it. Before the crack of the shot finally rolled down off the distant spine and across the pan and into all of us, arriving late, arriving from 1.5 miles of empty dark, the sound of the impossible catching up to the fact of it. And in the space that one shot bought, the shock of it, the militia rush broken on the death of their point man, the half-second of held breath across the whole bowl, our extraction bird came in over the south rim with its lights killed and its guns live, raised at last on a net that cleared the moment it crested the ridge. And the night that had been ours to lose became, in the down blast of those rotors, ours to survive. We got the wounded aboard. We got the living aboard. And I stood at the ramp in the rotor wash with the north rim clear, and the column broken and Doss's blood freezing on my gloves, and I looked back to the north and east, to the black tooth of the spine 1.5 miles across the dark, where a soldier I had left to die had just made the finest shot I have ever seen a human being make, and I did the only piece of arithmetic that has ever mattered to me since. I did not get on the bird. There is a version of that night where I get on the bird. It is the sensible version, the one the manuals endorse, the one where a commander preserves his remaining force and does not spend himself in a helicopter and a crew on a single soldier who is 1.5 miles away across ground still crawling with the enemy. I had written her off once already using exactly that logic, and the logic had been sound, and I had been wrong in the only way that counts. I was not going to be right in that way twice. I told the crew chief to hold the wounded and lift on my mark or on the column's return, whichever came first, and not to wait past that for anyone, including me. I told Peralta he had the team. He started to argue and I put my hand flat on his chest, not hard, and I said, "She held our left since the crossing. I'm going to go hold hers." And then I took the 2 men who would not have let me go alone if I'd ordered them to, Vance, and a young corporal named Ilse who could move on the ice like he'd been born on it. And the 3 of us went off the north lip of the pan on foot, into the dark, toward the spine, while the bird sat behind us with its guns live, and its promise to leave without us hanging in the cold. 1.5 miles on the open reach in the dark, toward a fight, is a long education in what a person is. I had spent 9 days deciding what Ruth Vale was from the outside, from a rifle case and a silence, and a stranger's face the cold had weathered. And I spent that 1.5 miles learning it from the inside, one frozen stride at a time, reading her whole night off the ground as we crossed it. Here was where the column had spread. You could see it in the churned snow, the wide dispersed track of men who had learned to fear a single shooter. Here was a militiaman down in the open, taken cleanly, a man who had rushed a fold and never risen from it. Here was another, and another, spaced out along the corridor in the exact grammar of her defense. One threat, one shot, the most dangerous man in each moment taken first, a trail of arithmetic written across a mile of ice by a soldier we had named baggage. The shooting from the spine had stopped. I want to be honest about what that silence did to me, because it is the other half of the confession. When the shots had been coming, She was alive, and the mission was working, and I could tell myself I was going back to help her finish it. When the shots stopped, somewhere in the last 400 meters of our approach, the silence came down over the spine like a held breath that would not release, and every step after that I climbed toward the black rock with the certainty building in me that I had done it after all, that I had left her in the staging tent's contempt and left her again on the open ice. And now the reach and the cold and a squad in her rocks had finished the thing I'd started. And that I was going to reach the spine and find the finest soldier I ever served beside already gone, already a still shape in the stone, having spent the last of herself covering men who had not deserved a single one of her shots. We took the base of the spine hard and fast, expecting the flanking squad ready for it. We found what she had left of it. Two of them at the foot of the rocks, taken close, in the desperate fast rhythm I'd heard change in her fire near the end. Two more higher up, in the broken ground where the climb began, one of them with his weapon still shouldered, taken in the act. She had fought a squad up her own mountain in the dark, alone, wounded. I did not know yet that she was wounded, but the ground was already telling me, in a dark smear across a pale slab of stone that was not the enemy's. And she had broken that squad the way she had broken the column, one man at a time, refusing the whole night long to be the thing we'd decided she was. We found her near the top, in the high hide she had climbed to under fire to keep our left, the reset she'd told me about in that level voice while a squad came up the rocks beneath her. She was not gone. I will carry the moment I understood she was not gone for the rest of my life. The small pale plume of her breath in the beam of Ilse's light, ragged and slow but there, rising off her where she lay half-propped against the cold stone with the long rifle still couched across a rest she'd built from rock in her own pack, her eye no longer at the glass because she no longer had the strength to hold it there, but her hand was still on the rifle. Even then. Even spent, even bleeding from a wound low on her side where one of the squad had reached her before she reached him, even with the cold having done to her the thing the cold does to a body that has lain still in it for a night and given away all its warmth to the work. Even then, her hand was on the rifle, and her face, when the light found it, was turned out over the pan, toward the bowl where our wounded had been, toward the last place she'd sent a shot. "Meridian," I said. My voice broke on it and I let it. Her eyes came to me. It took her a moment to focus, and when she did, I watched her place me, the captain, the one who left her, and I braced for whatever a soldier is owed to say to the man who wrote her off and ran. She was owed all of it, every word. I had come a mile and a half across the ice to receive it, and I would have received it kneeling. She did not spend her strength on it. "The satchel man," she said, barely a whisper, her breath clouding thin between us. "In the bowl, did I get him in time? I lost the sightline right after. I couldn't confirm." For a moment, I could not answer. She had made the finest shot I have ever seen a human being make, 3,540 meters, in the deep cold, from a reset she'd climbed to under fire, with a squad closing on her position and her own blood in the snow beneath her. And she had not been able to see the end of it, and it had been eating at her in the dark ever since, the not knowing, because to a soldier like her an unconfirmed shot is a debt, and the man had been running at wounded she'd sworn to cover. "You got him," I said. "In time, 10 meters short of the litters, and he never lit the charge. Das is alive. Pharaoh's alive. Every man on those litters is alive, Sergeant. You saved all of them." Something went out of her at that, not the light, she held onto the light, but the tension of the debt, the arithmetic she'd been unable to close. Her eyes drifted shut for a second and opened again, and the smallest thing moved at the corner of her mouth, not a smile. She did not have a smile left in her, but the ghost of the place a smile would go. "Good," she said. "That was the one that mattered. We got her off the spine." Ilse got a pressure dressing into the wound at her side and Vance and I built a carry, and we took her down the rocks she had defended and out across the mile and a half of ice she had held all night, and I called the bird and told the crew chief to wait now, wait for us. We were coming in heavy and slow with a fourth, and the bird waited, and we brought Ruth Vale into the bowl she had saved twice over. Once with a shot from 1.5 miles away and once by refusing, again and again. To come off, the spine when coming off would have cost us our left. The team was at the ramp. Word travels through a broken element, without anyone saying it out loud. By the time we came down into the pan they all knew, in the wordless way men know a thing, that the covering fire that had carried them through the whole frozen night, the shots they'd called luck, then called the sky, then finally not called anything at all because there was no name left for it that wasn't her, had been one soldier on a spine of rock, alone, the paper shooter, the range queen, the stranger command had spent on us, and we had spent on the ice. Das was the one I watched. He was propped on the litter, gray with blood loss, and he had been the loudest. The whole 9 days, they sent us a range queen, somebody with a record and no trigger time. He watched us carry her up the ramp and lay her down beside him, and he looked at her for a long moment, at the wound in her side and the cold in her face, and the rifle we'd brought down still couched in her arm, because no one had been willing to take it from her hand, and I saw him try to speak and fail, and try again. "Sergeant," he got out finally, his voice was wrecked. "It was you, the whole night it was you." She turned her head to him. She did not have much left, but she had enough for this, and I think she gave it to him on purpose, because she had read him across the staging tent 9 days ago the way she read everything, and she knew exactly what he'd called her, and exactly what it would cost him now to sit in the truth of it. "It was my left to hold," she said. "Not I told you so, not you left me. Not 1 ounce of the reckoning she was owed, just the job named plainly the way she'd named it all night. It was my left to hold." And Das, hard Das, loud Das, who had put a name on her and made the whole team wear it, Das closed his eyes, and when he opened them there was water in them that had nothing to do with the cold. And he did the only thing a man can do when he has been that wrong about someone who has just saved his life. He reached across the small space between the litters with the arm that still worked, and he put his hand flat over her hand where it lay on the rifle, and he held it there, and he said, "Yes, Sergeant, it was, and you held it." Bird lifted us off the pan into a sky that was just beginning, far to the east, to think about gray. I sat on the cold floor of the cabin between the 2 litters that held Das and Ruth Vale, with the whole surviving weight of my team packed in around us and the reach falling away beneath, that flat white nothing that had wanted us and very nearly kept us, and I understood that I was leaving it a different man than the one who had crossed it. Not a better commander, necessarily. I would make other mistakes. But I would never again make the specific mistake I had made at the staging tent, the one that had a woman's silence read as weakness, and a stranger's competence discounted because I had not done the work of finding it out. That mistake was burned out of me. She had burned it out of me, one shot at a time, across a frozen dark, and the cost of the lesson was written in the dressing at her side and the gray in her face, and I have never let myself forget who paid it. She held on. That is the part I am most grateful for, and I do not say it lightly, because there was a stretch on that flight where I did not think she would. The cold takes more than a wound does. It goes into the deep places, slows the heart, thickens the blood, and she had given the cold a whole night of stillness on a spine of rock while she spent her warmth on the arithmetic that kept us alive. The medics worked on her the whole way back and she drifted at the edge of it, and twice her breath went thin enough that Ilse, who had gotten the first dressing into her, took her hand and said her name, her real name, Vale, and then, when that didn't reach her, the other one. "Meridian, stay with us. You held our left all night. Hold your own now." And she did. I do not know if it was the name or the order or her own stubborn refusal to leave a job unfinished, but she held. The number came at the debrief, 3 days later, when the recovery team had walked the ground, and the analysts had done the flat, unbelievable work of measuring what she had done. 3,540 meters, from the high reset to the man with the satchel in the bowl of the pan. They said it in the clipped, bloodless way those briefings say everything, a data point among data points, and there was a silence in the room after it that had nothing bloodless in it at all, because every man there had been on the ice and knew what that number meant. It was not a record for a record's sake. It was a distance across which a soldier, alone, wounded, freezing, with a squad coming up her rocks, had reached out and taken the one man in the world who was about to kill her wounded comrades, in the deep cold that fought her the whole way, with almost no margin at all, and had made it, and then had lain there in the dark unable to see the result, carrying the not knowing as a debt. Until a captain who'd left her behind came 1.5 miles across the ice to tell her the man had gone down 10 meters short. They gave her things after. The army has its ways of nomming what a soldier did, its ribbons and its citations and its careful language, and she received all of it in the same level silence with which she had received our contempt, neither warmed nor cooled by it, because Ruth Vale had never once in the whole affair been doing it for the nomming. But the nomming that mattered did not happen in a citation. It happened on a cold flight line 6 weeks later, when she came back to us. She insisted on coming back to the same element, and I did not have the words to tell her what that meant, that the soldier we had treated worst wanted most to return to us, and the whole team was drawn up on the tarmac in the gray morning to receive her. I had not ordered a formation. I want to be clear about that because it matters. I did not stand them to. There is a kind of respect a commander can order, and it is worth exactly what an ordered thing is worth, which is not much. What happened on that flight line I could not have ordered and would not have dared to. She came off the transport with her rifle case on her shoulder, the same long black coffin of a thing she'd carried across the staging tent 9 days into a different life, carried like it weighed nothing, set down without a sound, and she started across the tarmac toward us. And Das, who was on his feet again with a cane and a limp he'd carry the rest of his life, Das straightened up out of his slouch and came to attention. And his hand came up in a salute, so sharp it might have been the last true thing left in him. And then they all did. The whole element, one man at a time, the way she had taken the column one man at a time, Peralta and Vance and Ilse, and the rest, coming to attention down the line and their hands coming up. A salute rolling down the formation like the crack of a far shot rolling down off a spine, arriving late but arriving. Every man of them offering the paper shooter, the range queen, the stranger they had spent on the ice. The only thing a soldier has that cannot be ordered, and cannot be faked, and cannot be given to anyone who has not earned it all the way to the bone. And I stood at the end of the line, the captain who had left her, and I brought my own hand up last and held it longest, and Ruth Vale stopped in front of us in the gray morning with her rifle case on her shoulder, and looked at the whole line of us saluting her, the men she had carried through the dark, and she did not smile, and she did not gloat, and she did not say a single word about the tent or the ice or the order I had given to leave her. She just returned the salute, level, certain, the way she did everything. "Sergeant Vale," I said when I could, "welcome back to the element. You have your old sector." "Thank you, Captain." A pause, the wind moving across the flight line, the cold breath of her clouding thin between us the way it had on the spine. And then, because she had read me across a staging tent 9 days into all of it and knew what I had been carrying every day since, she gave me the one thing I had not dared to ask her for. "It's good ground," she said. "I've always liked holding a left. Somebody has to be the line everything else gets measured against. Meridian, the line you run the world along, the one you measure everything else by." I had left her in the rocks because I had measured her wrong, and she had spent a whole frozen night proving that she was, in the most exact and literal sense, the thing you measure by, the fixed line, the true one, the mark against which I would judge every soldier and every decision for the rest of my career and find most of them, and most of myself, falling short. I have given a lot of orders in the cold, and I have made my peace with almost all of them. The one I would give differently, I give differently now, every day, in the only way a man can once the moment is past, by never again mistaking a quiet soldier's silence for weakness, by doing the work of finding out what stands in front of me before I decide what it's worth, by remembering that the finest shot I ever saw was fired by the one person I had already thrown away. She held our left since the crossing. She never didn't have it. And to the end of my life, when I want to know what a soldier is, I will not look at a record or a rifle case or the set of anyone's shoulders in the dark. I will look for the one holding the line everything else gets measured against, in the cold, alone, with her hand still on the rifle. And I will know her because I left her once, and she saved us all anyway.